It's smart, it's funny, it's poignant, it's real, it's honest. Please welcome to stage the lady who wrote it, she produced it, she directed it, she starred in it, and some other guy, Jennifer Westfeldt and Jon Hamm. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
I got to start.
This is fulfilling a lot of my boy band
I know, this is
fantasies.
very exciting.
Do you want to get out of the way now?
It's a One Direction moment for me right now. without the terrible haircut, or with a different terrible haircut. Sorry.
Where was the seed? Where was the seed of this story? Where did it come from?
It came from us sort of watching all of our friends, one by one, have kids over the past 4 or 5 years, and just feeling out of sync with our peer group, and, you know, sort of watching our friends kind of disappear for a year or two, and we only get to see them at one-year-old birthday parties, and, you know, just wondering sort of how they manage the transition, and everyone manages it a little bit differently.
How do they feel now that they're the subject of this very funny film?
They're mortified.
Did you have a
Yeah,
private screening
We've
for
lost
them?
all of our friends.
No, but in fact, when we first finished this, when Jen first finished the script, we had a read through of it at our house. And Adam Scott, who we always knew we wanted to be the lead, came over and read it, and he finished reading it, and he came over to Jen and was like, "Is this about me? I feel really bad. I'm sorry." And we were like, "No, it's not about anybody in particular."
Adam actually maintains that we only wrote the movie so we can hang out with him and his wife Naomi again after they've had kids. We, never get to see them.
So you're basically saying you got your friends across to your apartment, got them drunk, and signed them up for the movie. Perfect.
Exactly. Basically, just like that.
The casting's just pristine as well. I mean, did you have in your head, you've got friends in there that you've worked with or as well, and some people that maybe you didn't know so well. Did you have an idea of who you wanted for those specific roles?
Not particularly. I mean, we invited Adam over that first night, as John mentioned, and after that we just were sort of campaigning for Adam or bust, as the lead. But other than that, Kristen came aboard pretty early before she shot Bridesmaids, and I think she was interested in doing something a little more dramatic. Her role is more dramatic and a little quieter than she's normally seen as, which was of interest to her. And everyone else kind of came to us through the regular casting process.
Yeah, there are 4 people that were in Bridesmaids in this movie, which is weird, because it's not like Bridesmaids, really. It isn't. But no, honestly, the way it happened was we kind of looked at these parts and we found these people just fit very well into the parts. I mean, Maya Rudolph, who I knew a little bit from Saturday Night Live, she had left the show by the time I had hosted, but she came back to do some little bits on it, and we had some friends in common. But Maya just has this radiant kind of maternal energy, and is wickedly funny and smart. And O'Dowd, who most people in America didn't really know, at that time, because Bridesmaids hadn't come out yet, but I had worked on him, worked on the film with him.
That was smart, Johnny.
And had done a read through of another script with Chris, and so I knew him a little bit, enough to kind of talk to his agent at least and say, "Hey, I'm that guy that he might remember," and he's again just a perfect fit, and we just really got lucky. The fact that there was this synchronicity with Bridesmaids was just lucky, and we were lucky that we made the movie when we did, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to afford any of these guys.
Actors.
They'll
never speak to us again.
Too expensive.
But each person brings something kind of almost like the jigsaw puzzles to the story, and you get the tone so right, because one minute you're laughing, belly laughing, and the next minute it's a real kind of poignant, honest reflection or comment and stuff, and it feels like this subject's been covered in movies before, but not in this way.
Well, I think it was important to sort of, for us anyway, to kind of attack the subject matter with some honesty, and there's some darkness in it, and definitely some squirm-inducing scenes, I think, for some people. But, we were just hoping to show a pretty wide spectrum through all of these characters, and we're hoping that, everyone can identify with at least one of the 8 in the story, and sort of how they have their journey.
Let's take a quick look at a clip of the 6 of you, which is when we kind of see you all together for the first time. You're a writer, producer, director, star of the film. How is she as a boss?
Great. Honestly, the best kind of person you can have for a director is somebody who is intimately familiar with the material, not the people. Although I do joke, I had to sleep with the director to get this job. But I experienced it with Ben Affleck on The Town as well. Ben had torn that script apart and rewrote it, and so was very, very familiar with the world and the story and where you were at any 1 minute in the story. And Jen was that way as well. And I can't even say it hard enough, because it's on a low budget with no money. That is imperative. You need a leader that's going to be on top of it at all times, because you often have to pivot. We had experiences on this film where we woke up to 17 inches of snow.
Almost every day.
And,
It was the worst
so it's like,
winter.
well, the truck's stuck in New Jersey, and the PAs are stuck on the train, and
Our
the
camera
camera
lenses
lenses are
were
frozen. So
It's just so
what are we
not
going to do?
fun.
And it's like, we're going to figure it out in just a minute, but let's start shoveling. And that's what you have to do. And Jen was the consummate leader, and incredibly prepared and incredibly enthusiastic, which also helps, and inspiring. I think not just to me. I knew that going in, but to the rest of the cast. When you have somebody that leads by example, that attitude trickles down fairly quickly and in a very positive way.
As Jimmy mentioned, we had the greatest crew in the world and so many wonderful producers, so it was really much more of a collaboration than me directing anyone. It felt, and we always talk about getting an independent film made as like pushing a huge boulder up a mountain, and you hope to just gather as many great people with a good attitude and spirit to sort of just like help you push it, and that's very much how it feels. It sort of feels like garage theater a little bit. You have no money and no time, and 2 takes, 3 takes. We had babies and toddlers, sobbing every day on the set, and a few dark days in that respect. And the weather was just disastrous. So you really just needed people who were can-do and happy to be there, and no attitudes. There were no trailers, no assistants, no perks. No one gets paid really much of anything. So you have to just surround yourself with wonderful people, and we were so lucky to have those type of people on this.
Yeah, and in terms of the script, I mean, was there, because it feels so conversational when you watch the film. It feels like real conversations that are going on. It doesn't. That's what you feel like you're in it with the people that draws you in.
Yeah, Jen has an amazing ear for dialogue, and that's not just this film. That's all 3 of her films that she's written and produced. But part of it, I think, is the movie begins with a big idea. What are these 2 people? These 2 people that are friends want to have a baby and remain friends, and not get married and not get romantically entangled and blah blah blah. But kind of the state of the current romantic comedy at this point is not about a big idea. It's about something magical, where it's like it's a magic wedding dress that anyone that wears has to get married within 30 days, or Ryan Reynolds will get angry, and then oh boy. Or you pee in a fountain, and then your car talks to you, or so. It's this crazy thing that exists outside of reality in many ways. And what I think our film does, and Jen's films do in general, is ground themselves in people that you can recognize and have a very real sense of actual conversations, as you say, or actual situations that we've certainly found ourselves in, and I think people can relate to.
Yeah.
We were so lucky that
I love Ryan Reynolds, by the way. Don't get me wrong.
We were lucky that all 8 of the cast had either met each other, worked together, known each other a bit. Adam has been a friend of ours for 15 years, so there's a lot of sort of built-in history and chemistry there. And obviously, Kristen and Maya have the most wonderful chemistry, and they had just worked with Chris O'Dowd, and Megan had been on SNL, and her husband had worked with Adam, and there were so many sort of familial aspects. And going in, that's so helpful. You have no rehearsal, you have no time. We shot this in 24 days. I mean, it was insane. So to have sort of that built-in chemistry a little bit was a godsend.
Let's take it's a great example of the chemistry. This is when you are revealing the idea that
we're gonna. Okay.
We realize.
Finishing each other's sentences, that whole thing. That's what I meant about it feeling just so fluid and you know that conversation's just. Was there much room for improv or was it?
I wish there was more room for it because
I
when
guess
you're
it's
working
time
with
thing,
these
yeah.
actors, you want people to just go on for days, and we were able to do that a bit when the scenes were just like 2 people or 4 people. But in the group scenes, it's again you're just so up against it every day to get the scene in the can that
Yeah.
you know we have a scene, a really big dinner scene with 8 people, and it's a very long sort of climactic scene. So if someone was ad-libbing, you know, as you're on one end of the table, by the time you got around to the other side, you know, you obviously
Yeah.
can't go back and cover it again. So in those cases, we had to be pretty letter perfect. But the one-on-one scenes, it was easier.
Yeah, that's the scene where you do angry drunk really well.
Yes. Yes, my stock in trade. For example, that the scene we showed previous, the setup of the film around the table, that was a one location that we had quite a lot of time at. So
Yeah.
we could have cut together a 20-minute version of that scene.
Yeah.
Because Kristen was going off and doing hilarious things, and Maya was doing things, and people started singing, and there was a lot of hilarity that was happening. But we're kind of like, yeah, what's the scene about? We're basically just sitting around telling jokes.
Yeah.
We do need to get to which is the danger of improv, honestly, is you can lose the narrative thread.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky balance to strike.
And Jennifer, for you in terms of, you know, having these different hats on and, you know, the writer, director, producer, star of the film and stuff, is it kind of easy to you know, change hats whilst you're, you know, because you're in a scene and you're also thinking about...
Yeah. Well, I didn't intend to direct it. I had no interest in directing it.
Really?
We were pursuing directors, and for a time, a very, very famous director was going to direct the film, and we were very excited.
Martin Scorsese.
No, wasn't him. It wasn't him, but it was somebody else very fancy who shall remain nameless.
Steven Spielberg.
But at any rate, this fellow, whose name we won't tell you, he kind of reread the script and realized how...
Are you that bad at keeping secrets?
Yeah, no, he reread the script and he realized how...
Quentin Tarantino, you guys. I'm not kidding.
I'm not going to tell the story. I'm just done. I'm done. Anyway, he noticed how many days there would be babies and toddlers in the shoot, and so he thought better of it, which I remember in like 2 weeks into our shoot, I was like, quite right. That was the right decision, sir. But actually, Jake Kasdan was on board to direct it, who ended up being a producer on the movie. But, you know, there's usually one moment when you're putting together an independent film where your actors' schedules line up, and, you know, in this case, it was the dead of winter for, 3 weeks last year. And at that point, Jake was still working on Bad Teacher, which kept sort of dragging out. So he wouldn't be available for prep. And he sort of cajoled me into considering directing it. And I really was nervous about it. And I just thought, that's madness. And he struck a deal with me that he would take his wife and his newborn baby, who was literally 2.5 months old at the time, and come to our set and be a second pair of eyes while I was on camera, so that he could sort of take care of when I was acting, and then I could direct the rest of the actors. So
Did you get the bug?
I don't think so. No, I mean, I don't know. It was the hardest thing I've ever done,
Wow, I mean,
But,
it's amazing first feature.
Thank
It's
you so
brilliant.
much.
And let's get some questions from our lovely audience here.
Good evening. A lot of respect for your work, John. And really, I suppose my question is, who was the biggest practical joker on set?
It's got to be a Dowd.
Oh, Dowd, I think.
Yeah, easily,
I mean,
like by a quantum level.
yeah.
He was.
He's a total goofball.
He was up to no good at all times. And which was very fun. It was really great to get to know Chris a lot, and I've since become a huge fan of the IT crowd, and so it was really cool to kind of know him first and then go back and see that. That was a cool experience.
I like his accent.
Yeah, he did a pretty
great,
good job.
didn't
Yeah.
he?
He's
I
got a
know.
real growly kind of...
And he also has a beard. So he's
There
beard
we-
and American.
there we go,
Just saying.
see?
The beard
Very
was fake,
different.
by the way.
Nail. That was a morning's growth. Next one. There we go. Just lady in the front row there, please. Thank you.
Nice T-shirt.
Thank you. I watched it just for this purpose. Sorry, that sounds weird.
I'm glad
but
it's clean.
I wore it recently, and never mind.
Fair
Not
enough.
important. Not important. But I was just wanting to ask your recent move. Like, you seem to be doing a lot of comedy recently, and is it a conscious choice, or are you just kind of finding yourself in those roles?
I've been very lucky to work with people whose work I find interesting, and Jen is certainly one of those people. To be able to work with people like not just Jen and Adam, but O'Dowd and Wig and people like that is a great honor. And honestly, like, it's nice to be chosen. This one I had a little bit of influence with the people doing the picking, but it's really nice to be a part of getting to work with people that inspire you in some way, and I've been lucky.
I imagine people ask you what it's like to work together, sort of thing. But I guess because you know each other so well, that can act as a positive in terms of how you write for him. You know, when you know that that's the role that he's playing.
Yeah, I mean, we produced this. This was the first time we had ever produced anything together, and that was exciting. It was kind of neat to sort of take it from, you know, the first little reading around our dinner table with pasta and wine, and then raise the money and find the actors and find the locations and beg for favors from everyone you know. And I remember that last day. It was the day we shot that big scene with all of us, and the three of us, Adam and John and I, you know, we were just kind of looking at each other. It was 5 a.m, and I think we were drinking beer and just like, did we really do this in 24 days? And it was, it just felt like a different sense of accomplishment than we sort of experienced before.
In 24 days, that's
Yeah, it was
insane.
madness. I mean, I was stealing scenics with my DP for like 2 years, but you know, other than that, just the actual shoot was really, really short.
Wow. Hello.
Hi, good evening. First of all, it's an absolute treat to see you in the flesh rather than coming out of my television set. So, welcome to London.
That's terrifying.
Speaking of television and obviously speaking of movies, you've both worked in both the television and the movie industry. What do you both like or perhaps dislike about both industries?
It's remarkable how they seem to be sort of dovetailing at this moment in time, at least in the States, and I think now, in fact, in the UK and Europe as well. There's become a vast proliferation of outlets for content, not just, you know, the 4 major broadcast networks and HBO and Showtime, and over here not just BBC and 1, 2, 4, ITV, all the stuff that's over here. There's tons of cable outlets, and even more now. There's starting to become original programming for on demand and direct download, like Netflix and other things like that. So it's all kind of becoming a very similar experience, and as such, you really just want to focus on what the content is. Like, is it something you want to do? Obviously, making a big movie about a board game or a toy for $250 million is a whole other, you know, kettle of fish. But if you really just want to focus on telling a story and being in something that you can really sink your teeth into, that's become the purview of independent film or cable television, honestly. And we're living in kind of an awesome time to be an actor because you have so many more opportunities to practice what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I've worked only on network television, not on cable, and I think that in the States, cable TV is really where it is much more cinematic and it is much more like film, and I think the quality is so much higher on cable, mostly because they sort of have the British method, you know, just 13 episodes or 8 episodes rather than 22, 24, which I think is so much harder to kind of keep the quality up week in, week out, to write, you know, and perform something, you know, that many times. So for me, honestly, I found the most creative freedom in independent film and on stage.
Hi. I wanted to know how you found it shooting, obviously in such a tight schedule with such a strong comedic cast, but also with such serious sort of undertones of the film. Was it like emotionally draining, or did you just want to die at the end of every day?
Yes and yes. It was. I mean, every actor in it was literally the dream cast. I can't believe everyone said yes. You know, it was such a it felt so lucky and blessed, and at the same time I felt tremendous pressure to just do right by everyone, you know, to sort of make sure everyone felt safe, make sure everyone felt like they got enough takes, even if we were, you know, losing time, and it was harder with the emotional scenes because we'd sometimes really get 2 or 3 takes and that's it. With the exception of there's a scene that's really a big chunk of the film. It's sort of a climactic climactic scene, mostly between Adam and Jon, but it's all of us at a dinner table. And that was the only sort of scene we got to spend a great deal of time on because we sort of did it like a one-act play all day long. And I think everyone was exhausted after that day because we ran through it, you know, a million times. But it's in some ways it's easier when you're working so fast because no one ever gets stale. I mean, if anything, you just wish you had more chances and more variations. But we were pretty drained every night. I would get home and then we'd be on conference calls all night and then check the weather endlessly because the weather kept, you know, ruining everything. 18 inches of snow, and I was hoping for a wide shot that takes place in September. You know, I mean, everything was sort of a constant crisis, and Jon was amazing because he would be like, "Oh, we're just dealing with today's crisis today. Tomorrow is another crisis."
And that's kind of the thing you have to do. And for me, it was relatively easy because I got to go home and go to bed. She had to go home and go watch like 2 hours of dailies. So it was, you know, my job was sort of like, all right, let's manage as a producer and as a sort of live-in, you know, therapist, was sort of let's manage what we can manage today and let's not worry about tomorrow will be another whole thing. We'll worry about that tomorrow. And that's kind of what you have to do on something like this is really take it one day at a time and knock down what you have. And then by the end of it, you look up and you go, oh, shit, we made a movie. We're done. Great.
You got favourite scenes? Last question. Favourite scene each from the film?
I guess my favorite scene, there's a scene that happens, Jen's mentioned it a couple times, in a ski house in Vermont. That is a bit of a climactic scene in it because it's got all of our major players. We shot it, in fact, in the Bronx, which doesn't look anything like Vermont, but there happens to be this log cabin in the middle of the
100%
Bronx.
authentic log cabin at the end of this like Goodfellas street. It's the strangest
Very
thing
weird.
you've ever seen.
But we got it, and it was also happened to be the last day of shooting, so it was a very cathartic and very fun and very worthwhile sense of fulfillment and accomplishment finishing that scene.
Yeah, and he's amazing in the scene. Really.
Yeah,
amazing.
I'm pretty great.
He is. He is. It's really something.
You got a favourite scene?
I mean, I love that scene too. It was one of those scenes where on the page, I was like, this is a 14-page scene. Can you do that in a movie? Like, it felt ridiculous to even have it, and it was gratifying to have people respond to it because it sort of has this slow burn and everybody's in it together, and it was the most fun to shoot because we were all together for the only time the 8 of us shot something together. But there are a lot of moments. I love the scene with you and Adam at the bar. I love the first scene where we sort of jump in time to 4 years later and come to it's Adam's character's birthday, and we have to like truck all the way to Brooklyn. Like we were the only people who've like brought the presents and the cake and the wine, and we get there and Chris and it's their house and their kids are screaming and like they're not ready and there's like no food and no gifts and no nothing, and
I'm in the toilet.
You know, and they come late and they're at each other, and I think that's another favorite just because it's sort of everybody together.
Please do more.
Oh.
Thank you all so much for your
Thank
time
you
and
for
your
coming.
questions. Round of
So nice
applause
to
for
meet
Jen
you
and
all.
Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you so much.